I simply cannot comprehend why you waste your time with that construction work when you could be accomplishing something meaningful with your life. My name is Marcus, and those harsh words came from my father during what was meant to be a pleasant family gathering in Tulsa, Oklahoma. I'm 28 years old, work as a project supervisor for Redwood Construction Company, and I have been covering his medical expenses for 6 years without his knowledge. The incident occurred at my aunt's residence on a Sunday evening in March. My father, Vincent, sat at the table's head, slicing into his roast beef as if he were analyzing my entire existence. My cousin Miranda was present with her device, constantly filming family occasions for her social media accounts. I thought nothing unusual about it then. Marcus was managing just fine, Dad. My sister Bethany interjected, attempting to redirect the discussion. She understood how these meals typically unfolded. Dad would discover something to critique about my decisions, my profession, my life path. It had become his preferred pastime. Managing fine. Dad chuckled, though there was no genuine warmth in it. He's nearly 30, and he's still handling tools for work. When I reached his age, I had already established my accounting business. I continued eating, remained silent. I had discovered years earlier that disputing with him only worsened situations. What he remained unaware of was that monthly I transferred $2,400 from my savings to handle his cardiac medication expenses. His insurance provided partial coverage, but the co-payments and specialty medications were costly. I had been managing this since his initial heart attack when I was 22. Construction provides good income, I mentioned quietly, avoiding eye contact with my plate. Does it provide sufficient income to maintain a family, to purchase a home, to create something enduring? His voice carried that recognizable tone of disappointment. Or are you simply going to continue residing in that apartment, working manually like some laborer? Miranda laughed at something on her device. My Aunt Helen attempted to shift the topic to her neighbor's new landscaping, but Dad wasn't done. I simply feel concerned about you, son. I observe your cousins getting married, beginning families, developing careers that have significance. And then there's you. The words affected me differently that evening. Perhaps it was because I had recently received a promotion to senior project supervisor. Perhaps it was because I had been considering asking Jennifer for an actual date instead of just meeting for coffee after work. Or perhaps it was because I had spent my lunch break that same day arranging Dad's next cardiology visit and ensuring his prescription renewals were properly scheduled. I completed my meal in silence while Dad continued his speech about responsibility and drive. What I didn't realize was that Miranda had filmed everything, and she was about to transform everything. Dad experienced his first heart attack 6 years earlier, shortly after my 22nd birthday. I was recently graduated from college, working my initial real position with Redwood Construction, understanding the business from the beginning. The medical statements began arriving immediately. His insurance handled the hospital stay and basic medications, but the specialized cardiac medications and frequent specialist appointments created enormous co-payments. Mom had died from cancer 3 years prior to that, leaving Dad to manage everything independently. My sister Bethany was attending nursing school in Oklahoma City, overwhelmed with student debt. My brother Trevor was deployed overseas with the military. That left me. I never inquired if Dad required assistance with the expenses. I simply began covering them. I would contact the pharmacy directly, place my credit card on record for his prescriptions. I would receive the cardiology statements through mail because I had modified the billing address to my apartment. Dad assumed his insurance handled everything. He never questioned anything, never reviewed the statements. The funds came from wherever I could locate them. I worked additional hours on weekends, accepted side projects, lived in an inexpensive apartment instead of purchasing a house. While my friends were taking trips and buying new vehicles, I was ensuring my dad's heart medication remained current. $2,400 monthly like clockwork. Dad owned a small accounting business downtown. He had developed it from nothing, and he took pride in that. Maybe that explains why he couldn't comprehend my decision to work in construction. In his perspective, I was discarding my business degree to work in dirt with power tools. What he didn't recognize was the fulfillment I discovered in constructing something tangible. Observing a foundation being poured, seeing walls erected, knowing that families would inhabit the homes we constructed. Redwood Construction specialized in residential building, and we maintain a reputation for excellent work. I had begun as an assistant project supervisor and advanced my position. My supervisor, Jacob, had been suggesting partnership possibilities, but Dad only noticed the dirt beneath my fingernails and the work boots beside my door. The warning indicators had existed for months. Dad's remarks were becoming harsher, more regular. Family gatherings became chances for him to enumerate my deficiencies. Bethany mentioned that he had been questioning her about my finances, wondering how I managed my apartment on a construction worker's income. Miranda had always served as the family mediator, the person who attempted to smooth over Dad's harsh edges. She was 25, worked as a marketing assistant, and possessed a talent for deflecting tension with humor or distraction. I trusted her. She had grown up more like a sister than a cousin since her mother Helen and my mother were close friends. That trust was about to benefit me in ways I never anticipated. The text message from Miranda arrived 3 days following the dinner. Simply a brief "call me when you have time." Important. I was at a job location in Broken Arrow, reviewing electrical blueprints with our foreman when my phone buzzed. I returned her call during my lunch break, sitting in my truck with the windows lowered and the Oklahoma heat surrounding me. "I need to show you something," she said immediately. "Can you visit my apartment after work?" Her voice possessed an edge I wasn't accustomed to hearing. Miranda was typically lighthearted, quick to laugh. This was different. I drove to her place in Midtown Tulsa, a renovated warehouse with exposed brick walls and tall ceilings. She opened the door with her laptop already running, her expression serious. "Take a seat," she said, indicating her couch. "I filmed Sunday dinner. I was creating a video for Instagram. Just family content, you understand. But I captured something you need to hear." She pressed play on a video file. I could observe the dinner table, hear the familiar voices of our family, then Dad's voice, clear as day. "I simply don't understand how anyone can be such a complete failure at 28 years old. Marcus is going nowhere quickly, and he's too stubborn to acknowledge it." The words that followed were worse. Dad discussed how I was wasting my life, how I would never accomplish anything, how he felt embarrassed to tell people what his son did for employment. He called me worthless and said I was a disgrace to the family name. I had been at the table. I had heard some of it, but hearing it replayed, recorded with that casual cruelty in his voice, felt different. This wasn't frustration or concern. This was contempt. "There's more," Miranda said quietly. She fast-forwarded to another section where Dad was speaking to Uncle Robert about family finances. "At least my medical expenses aren't a burden on anyone. Insurance handles everything." I sat back on her couch and felt something change inside my chest. Not anger exactly, more like clarity. "How long have you been covering his expenses?" Miranda asked. 6 years. She closed the laptop and looked at me with something like fury in her eyes. "Marcus, that's not acceptable. What he said about you, what he thinks about your life, and you've been supporting him this entire time." I drove home in silence, thinking about $2,400 monthly for 72 months. Thinking about the trips I hadn't taken, the house I hadn't purchased, the life I'd postponed. Thinking about Dad sitting at that dinner table, calling me a complete failure while I paid for the medication that kept his heart functioning. By the time I reached my apartment, I knew what I needed to do. I didn't make any hasty decisions. That wasn't my approach, and it wouldn't achieve what I needed to accomplish. Instead, I spent the following week documenting everything. Bank statements, pharmacy receipts, cardiology expenses, insurance, benefit explanations, 6 years of financial records that told a story Dad had no idea existed. The monthly automatic payment to Brookshire Pharmacy was scheduled for the 15th of each month. His cardiology appointment co-payments processed on whatever day he had his appointments, typically the third Wednesday. The specialized medication co-payments charged my credit card twice monthly, regular as clockwork. I contacted Jennifer on Thursday evening. She was a structural engineer who collaborated with Redwood Construction on our larger projects. We had been meeting for coffee after work sites for months, dancing around something that felt like it could become more than friendship. "Want to have dinner instead of coffee tomorrow?" I asked. Actual dinner with plates and everything, a complete experience. We went to a steakhouse in downtown Tulsa. Over dinner, I told her about the recording, about the medical expenses, about the decision I was making. I needed to express it aloud to someone who wasn't family, someone who could tell me if I was being reasonable or just vindictive. "So you've been covering his heart medication for 6 years, and he has no knowledge?" Jennifer asked. "None. He thinks insurance handles everything." And he called you a complete failure, among other things. Jennifer put down her fork and looked at me across the table. Marcus, that's financial abuse. Maybe not intentional, but that's what it is. You've been supporting him while he criticizes you. That weekend, I made the calls. First to Brookshire Pharmacy to remove my credit card from Dad's account. Then to Dr. Williams' cardiology office to update the billing information back to Dad's address. Finally, to my bank to cancel the automatic transfers. The pharmacy technician, Brenda, had been handling Dad's prescriptions for years. She recognized my voice. Are you certain about this, Marcus? Your dad's medications are quite expensive without the payment assistance. I'm certain. Please remove all my payment information from his account effective immediately. What should I tell him when he comes in for his next refill? Tell him to contact his insurance company. The most difficult call was to Dr. Williams's office. His nurse, Patricia, had been copying me on Dad's test results and appointment summaries for years, thinking I was helping coordinate his care. Mr. Bennett, is everything acceptable with your father's treatment plan? Everything's fine with his treatment. I just won't be involved in the financial aspects anymore. Please update his billing address to his home address and remove my contact information from his file. There was a pause. Does your father know about this change? He will soon. I spent Sunday afternoon writing a letter. Not an angry letter, not a vindictive letter, just facts. A clear explanation of what had been happening for 6 years and why it was ending. The letter was 2 pages long. I detailed every monthly payment, every copay, every prescription cost. I included copies of bank statements and pharmacy receipts. I explained that his insurance covered roughly 60% of his cardiac care costs, and that I had been covering the remaining 40% without his knowledge. At the end, I wrote, I hope you understand that I can no longer provide this financial support while being described as a complete failure who will never accomplish anything. I wish you well with your health care moving forward. I signed it, sealed it in an envelope, and drove to his house that evening. Dad was watching television in his living room, the same recliner where he had recovered from his heart attack 6 years earlier. I handed him the envelope. What's this? Some information you should have. He opened it right there, read the first page, then the second. I watched his face change as he processed the numbers, the dates, the reality of what I had been doing. Marcus, I had no idea. I know. Why didn't you tell me? Because you never asked. Dad called me the next morning at 6 a.m. before I had even left for the job site. We need to talk. I think the letter covered everything. Marcus, please come over before work. I drove to his house, still in my work clothes. Dad was waiting on his front porch with coffee and a stack of papers. His face looked older than it had 3 days earlier. I went through my medical files last night, he said. All of them from the beginning. He spread the papers across the porch table. Insurance statements, pharmacy receipts, billing notices. Most of them had my name or my address somewhere in the documentation. I found this in my filing cabinet, he said, holding up a letter from his insurance company. It was dated 4 years earlier, explaining that his cardiac medications had exceeded his annual prescription benefit limit and that he would be responsible for co-payments moving forward. I never opened it. I sat down across from him and waited. There are dozens of these letters, bills, notices, benefit explanations. I just assumed everything was handled automatically. He looked up at me with something I had never seen in his eyes before. How much money are we talking about total? I had done the math Sunday night after writing the letter. About $173,000. The number hit him like a physical blow. He sat back in his chair and stared out at his front yard where Mom's roses were starting to bloom. $173,000 give or take, and I called you a complete failure. You did. Dad was quiet for a long time. Then he started talking, and what came out surprised me. Your mother handled all the medical bills when she was sick. All the insurance calls, all the paperwork, all the fighting with the companies. When she died, I just couldn't face it anymore. I threw the medical mail in a box and hoped it would sort itself out. He pulled out another paper, this one from his bank. I've been wondering for years how my checking account stayed so stable. I thought maybe my accountant was handling something automatically, or the insurance was better than I realized. The truth was simpler and more painful than either of us had expected. Dad hadn't been deliberately taking advantage of me. He had been burying his head in the sand about anything medical related since Mom's death, too traumatized by the memory of fighting insurance companies during her cancer treatment. "I owe you an apology," he said. "And I owe you money." "You don't owe me money." "Yes, I do. $173,000, Dad. You don't have that kind of money." "Then I'll figure out how to get it." He was serious. I could see it in his face. The same stubborn determination that had built his accounting practice from nothing. But I could also see something else. The weight of realizing that his complete failure son had been carrying his financial burden for 6 years while he criticized every choice I made. "There's something else," I said. "Miranda has recordings of other family dinners. Apparently, this wasn't the first time you've talked about me like that." Dad's face went gray. "What did I say?" "Does it matter? The point is, you've been saying it." "Marcus, I never meant." "Yes, you did. You meant every word." I went to work that morning with a clarity I hadn't felt in years. My supervisor, Jacob, found me reviewing blueprints for our newest residential project, a 15-house development in South Tulsa. "You look different today," he said. "Feel different." "Good different or bad different?" "Just different." I told him about the conversation with Dad, about the 6 years of medical payments, about the decision to stop. Jacob listened without interrupting, occasionally nodding or shaking his head. "So what now?" he asked when I finished. "Now I figure out what to do with an extra $2,400 a month." Jacob smiled. "I might have some ideas about that." We talked for an hour about the partnership opportunity he had mentioned before. Redwood Construction was expanding, taking on commercial projects in addition to residential. They needed someone to manage the new division, someone with a business degree and construction experience, someone like me. "The partnership buy-in is usually around $200,000, Jacob said, "but we could structure it as sweat equity plus monthly payments over 3 years. $2,400 monthly for 3 years was $86,400. Add the money I had been saving for a house down payment, and the partnership was within reach. That evening, I opened a new investment account and set up automatic transfers. The same amount that had been going to Dad's medical bills would now go toward my own future. The irony wasn't lost on me. Jennifer and I had dinner again on Wednesday, this time at her apartment where she cooked, and I told her about the partnership opportunity. "So you're going from paying for your dad's heart medication to buying into a construction company." "Looks that way." "How does that feel?" "Like I'm finally making decisions for myself instead of just reacting to everyone else's needs." My phone rang while we were cleaning dishes. Dad's name on the screen. "I've been thinking about what you said," he told me. "About the recordings, about the things I've said. I want to make this right." "How?" "I'm calling a family meeting. Sunday dinner at Helen's house again. Everyone who was there last week." "That you don't need to." "Yes, I do. And I want you to bring that recording." Sunday came faster than I expected. The same dining room, the same people, but everything felt different. Dad had asked Helen to set up her laptop to record the conversation. Miranda sat across from me, with her phone ready to play the original recording. "Before we eat," Dad said, standing at the head of the table, "I need to say something to everyone here, especially to Marcus." He told him everything, the medical bills, the money, the 6 years of support I had provided without his knowledge. He played Miranda's recording of his comments about me being a complete failure. Then he said something I had never heard from him before. "I was wrong. Not just about the money, though that's part of it. I was wrong about Marcus's choices, about his work, about his life. I let my own fears and disappointments turn into criticism of a son who has been more responsible and caring than I ever gave him credit for." The room was quiet. Bethany was crying. Uncle Robert was staring at his plate. Miranda was recording everything. "I don't know how to repay him," Dad continued. "I don't know how to make up for 6 years of taking his support for granted while tearing him down, but I'm going to try." Dad's first medical bill, without my support, arrived on the 23rd of the month. $2,418. He called me that evening. "The pharmacy says my insurance doesn't cover the full cost of my medications anymore." It never did. But I thought, "You thought wrong." The bills kept coming. Cardiology copays, prescription costs, specialist fees. Everything I had been quietly handling for 6 years suddenly became Dad's responsibility. His checking account, which had seemed mysteriously stable for so long, started dropping fast. By the end of the first month, Dad owed over $4,000 in medical expenses. He called Bethany, asking if she could help with the costs. Then Trevor, who was now stationed in Germany. Then Uncle Robert. I don't understand. Bethany told him during one of these calls. I thought your insurance covered everything. So did I. Miranda, who had been quietly sharing the family dinner recordings with our cousins, finally played them the audio of Dad calling me a complete failure while I had been paying his bills. The family group chat went silent for 3 days. When Trevor called Dad from Germany, he was direct. You called Marcus a complete failure while he was paying for your heart medication. I didn't know he was paying for anything. That's not the point, Dad. The point is how you talked about him. Dr. Williams' office called me in early May asking if there had been a mistake with the billing changes. Dad had missed 2 cardiology appointments because he couldn't afford the copays. No mistake, I told Patricia. Please coordinate his care directly with him moving forward. 3 weeks later, Dad sold his house. Dad moved into a smaller place, a townhouse near downtown Tulsa that cost half what his old mortgage had been. The equity from the house sale covered his outstanding medical bills and created a fund for future expenses. I signed the partnership agreement with Redwood Construction in June. Jacob and I celebrated with beer and barbecue at a restaurant overlooking the Arkansas River. Jennifer was there along with our project foreman and his wife. It felt good to celebrate something that was entirely mine. To Marcus, Jacob said, raising his beer, partner, friend, and the hardest working man I know. Dad started calling me once a week, usually on Sunday evenings. Not to ask for money or help, just to talk about work, about his new townhouse, about small things that didn't carry the weight of disappointment or criticism. I'm proud of you, he said during one of these calls in late summer. The partnership, the business you're building. I should have said that years ago. You should have. I know. Miranda showed me another recording from a recent family dinner. This one was Dad talking to Uncle Robert about my construction company, about the commercial projects we were taking on, about how smart and capable his son was. His voice carried the same pride he used to reserve for other people's children. Bethany graduated nursing school and got a job at St. Francis Hospital. Trevor was promoted to sergeant. Our family dinners became smaller, quieter affairs where people talked about their own lives instead of criticizing each other's choices. I kept the extra $2,400 monthly flowing into investments and business growth. By Christmas, my savings account looked better than it had in 6 years. Sometimes the best revenge is just living well enough that you don't need to prove anything to anyone anymore. In the months that followed, Dad's harsh words eventually caught up with him in ways beyond the financial burden. Word spread through his professional network about how he had unknowingly criticized the son who had been supporting him for years. Several longtime clients quietly took their business elsewhere, uncomfortable with his lack of awareness about his own family dynamics. His accounting practice, which had been his source of pride, began to struggle as his reputation for family responsibility came into question. Meanwhile, I found peace in knowing that sometimes the strongest response to betrayal is simply stepping back and letting people face the natural consequences of their choices.